The air on Mars was thin, just like the excuses coming out of command. Cade Arland adjusted his oxygen mask, squinting through the haze of red dust that seemed to coat everything in a fine layer of regret. Well, this is a wonderful start to the day, he muttered, kicking a rock that skidded pathetically across the ground. It was a bit like Mars itself, empty, dusty, and utterly unimpressive. Yet somehow, he'd been suckered into this godforsaken place with promises of glory and technological wonders. False advertising if he'd ever heard it. His team trailed behind him, a ragtag bunch of engineers and misfit soldiers. Get this, their mission was to fix things. That's what the brass said. As if you could fix a planet. All right, folks, Cade called over his shoulder. Let's assess the damage. Or, as I like to call it, another Tuesday. He turned to Tessa, the team's sarcastic comms specialist, who was currently poking a dead alien with a stick. Find anything interesting? Tessa looked up, her eyes behind her visor practically rolling into orbit. Yeah, Cade, I found out they're just as squishy as we are. Also, this guy here owes me $20. She tossed the stick aside, wiping her hands on her jumpsuit with an air of disgust. It's like someone forgot to tell them they were invading a planet full of people who spend their weekends watching disaster movies. Cade smirked, glancing at the alien remains. They looked like something out of a cheap horror flick, all limbs and slimy appendages. Looks like they picked the wrong neighborhood. No kidding, grunted Jax, the team's tactical genius, which was a polite way of saying he knew how to use the big guns. They send their best and brightest and get wiped out by a planet with as much atmosphere as a politician's promise. Speaking of wiping out, Cade said, scanning the horizon littered with debris and the occasional alien corpse, we need to figure out if they've left anything useful behind. You know, assuming they weren't just using our place as a vacation spot. Right, said Tessa, because nothing says luxury like radioactive dust storms and craters. Cade watched as his team spread out, poking through wreckage and remnants of what was once the alien equivalent of a landing party. There was something almost poetic about it, like watching vultures pick over the remains after a feast. Keep your eyes peeled for anything shiny. You know the rule: if it blinks, it's probably valuable or explosive. Jax chuckled, hefting a piece of alien tech that looked suspiciously like an oversized egg beater. This thing worth anything, or did they just have a really weird breakfast routine? Tessa snorted. I bet they scrambled their eggs with antimatter. As they sifted through the remains of the attack, Cade couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something obvious. The aliens, for all their advanced tech, had been as unprepared for Mars charms as a tourist in a rainstorm. You think they were expecting a welcoming committee? Jax shrugged, pocketing a shiny piece of alien metal. If they were, I hope they kept the receipt. The scene was a mess of twisted metal and scattered alien technology. It looked like someone had started building a futuristic theme park and then decided halfway through that maybe this wasn't the best location after all. Cade kicked another rock, a bit of tension easing out as it sailed into the distance. All right, folks, let's gather up whatever looks important and head back. Command's going to love hearing about this. An hour later, they were back at their makeshift base, a series of hastily assembled tents and structures that even a stiff breeze seemed to eye with malicious intent. Cade looked over the pile of alien tech they'd managed to haul back. Anyone got a clue what any of this does? Beats me, Tessa said, tapping a panel that lit up with a series of colors that were probably meaningless but looked fancy. Maybe it's a jukebox. Play some intergalactic hits. Jax leaned over her shoulder. Or a bomb. Let's not rule out the possibility of intergalactic boom. Cade sighed, rubbing at his temples. Well, let's not push any buttons until we know what they do. Last thing we need is to press the self-destruct button by accident. I thought that was what your morning coffee did to your insides, Tessa quipped. The team chuckled, the sound a brief respite from the madness around them. All jokes aside, they were standing in the middle of what could have been humanity's tomb. And yet, they'd survived, like cockroaches in a nuclear fallout. It was fitting somehow. Just then, their comms crackled to life, Command's voice crackling through the static, sounding as cheery as ever. Arland, report. What did you find out there? Cade clicked his comms on. Oh, just the usual. Stranded alien tech, a few exploded heads, and a profound realization that Mars hates everyone. Did you find anything useful? That depends on your definition of useful. We've got some tech that might be worth a look, assuming it doesn't turn us into alien popsicles when we turn it on. There was a pause, crackling with the weight of authority on the other end. Bring it back for analysis. We need to understand what we're dealing with. Sure thing, Command. We'll wrap it up with a nice bow and send it your way. Just be sure to open it at a safe distance. Understood. And Arland, yeah, good work out there. Cade smirked, cutting the comms. Well, looks like we're heroes. Ready for our medals, folks? Do they come with a hazard pay bonus? Tessa asked, one eyebrow raised. If only, Cade replied, shaking his head. Let's get this stuff packed up. And remember, no pressing random buttons. As they worked, Cade couldn't help but marvel at the absurdity of it all. Here they were, a handful of humans on Mars, sifting through the remains of an alien invasion like kids at a candy store. If he'd told his younger self this was where he'd end up, he'd have probably laughed and asked for another drink. Just as they were loading the last of the alien tech, a low rumble echoed across the landscape. The ground trembled, and Cade glanced around, eyes narrowing. Anyone else feel that, or did my lunch finally decide to fight back? Jack straightened, looking towards the horizon. Boss, we've got company. Cade followed his gaze and saw it, an alien ship, sleek and menacing, hovering just above the horizon. Well, shit, he muttered. Looks like they forgot to send the "sorry we invaded" card. Tessa was already at the comms, sending a signal to command. We've got incoming. I repeat, incoming. Cade took a deep breath, eyes fixed on the ship. All right, team. Looks like we get to test out our new toys sooner than expected. As the alien ship drew closer, Cade felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. Because if there was one thing humans were good at, it was making lemonade out of life's lemons. Or in this case, making a weapon out of alien refuse. He grinned, a sharp, feral thing. Let's show them what happens when you crash the wrong party. The team scrambled, gathering their makeshift arsenal. Cade hefted a piece of alien tech that looked vaguely like a cannon and vaguely like an art installation. Hey, Jax, you think this thing's loaded? Jax shrugged. Only one way to find out. If we die, I'm blaming you, Cade said, aiming the contraption towards the approaching ship. The air hummed with tension, and the alien vessel loomed large, an ominous presence against the Martian sky. But Cade felt strangely alive, standing on the precipice of something big, something that could go either horribly wrong or spectacularly right. With a deep breath and a silent prayer to whoever might be listening, he pressed the button. The device whirred to life, lighting up with an array of colors that could have been a warning or a polite hello. Either way, it was too late to back out now. The cannon fired, a beam of light erupting from the barrel and streaking across the sky. Cade watched, breathless, as it slammed into the alien ship with a satisfying explosion, debris scattering like confetti. Holy shit, Tessa breathed, her eyes wide behind her visor. It actually worked. Of course it did, Cade said with a grin, trying to sound more confident than he felt. This is what happens when you mess with engineers. The ship wobbled, belching smoke, and Cade couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. Told you we'd figure it out, he said, clapping Jax on the shoulder. But the victory was short-lived, as more ships appeared on the horizon, a fleet of alien vengeance. Cade's smile faded, his grip tightening on the cannon. Well, folks, looks like the encore's about to start. Tessa glanced at him, a mix of fear and determination in her eyes. What's the plan, Cade? He took a deep breath, the weight of their situation pressing down. Same as before, we fight, we improvise, and we survive. And we make damn sure they know that next time, they should pick a planet that's less of a pain in the ass. As the alien ships drew closer, Cade felt a strange sense of calm. Because if there was one thing Mars had taught him, it was that sometimes, all you could do was take the punch and laugh in the face of the universe's worst intentions. The fleet loomed, and with a wry grin, Cade squared his shoulders, ready to face whatever came next. All right, team, let's show them what humanity's made of. And with that, the battle for Mars began. The Martian wind, ever the nosy neighbor, whipped through the makeshift camp, rustling through tarps, shaking tents, and scattering red dust like a toddler on a sugar rush. Cade, still buzzing from their impromptu fireworks display, looked at his assembled team with the kind of grim determination usually reserved for people about to do something incredibly stupid. We need to head into the quarantine zone, he announced, gesturing towards the sprawling wasteland that had been the epicenter of the alien assault. The area had been marked off by command, mostly because they weren't sure if it was a hotbed of alien cooties or the key to unlocking advanced tech. Why? Tessa asked, arms crossed, skepticism etched across her face. You think the aliens left us a welcome to Mars gift basket? Cade grinned. Maybe. Or perhaps they just forgot their invasion plans in the glove compartment. Either way, it's our best shot at finding out why they decided to play tourist on Mars. Jax snorted. Yeah, I'm sure it had nothing to do with the scenic vistas and delightful climate. Cade adjusted his oxygen mask, glancing at the thin atmosphere above as if it might suddenly decide to thicken out of spite. Either come with me or enjoy the sunset. I hear it's breathtaking when you're not being shot at. They tramped through the dust, the quarantine zone looming ahead like a promise of untold horrors, or at least a decent story to tell if they made it out alive. The ground was littered with the remnants of alien tech and the occasional blown-up lander, each piece of debris a testament to the fact that the aliens had been as terrible at landing as they were at invasion. As they ventured deeper, the remnants of the alien presence became more apparent. Structures that looked like they'd been designed by someone with a penchant for tentacles loomed around them. Cade stopped by what appeared to be a control panel, its surface smooth and inscrutable. "All right, Tessa, do your thing. See if you can figure out what this does," Cade said, stepping back like he'd just handed her a live grenade. Tessa approached with a mixture of excitement and caution, her fingers dancing over the alien symbols. "If this thing starts singing, I'm quitting," she muttered. Jax chuckled, keeping a wary eye on the horizon. "And miss all this fun? Never." The panel lit up with a soft hum, colors shifting in a way that was probably intended to be soothing but felt more like a countdown to disaster. Tessa frowned, interpreting the interface with the focus of a cat watching a laser pointer. "Looks like some kind of communication device. Maybe they were trying to call home." Cade squinted at the alien tech, trying to ignore the way it seemed to pulse with an unsettling vitality. Hopefully they didn't leave a voicemail. The panel flickered, and suddenly a holographic display burst to life, showing a series of alien schematics and a lot of what looked suspiciously like strategic war plans. Cade's expression shifted from bemusement to genuine interest. "Well, what do you know? They did leave us a present." Tessa studied the schematics, her brows furrowing. This looks like a map. And these symbols here, they could be coordinates." "Coordinates to what?" Jax asked, leaning closer, eyes narrowed. Tessa shrugged, her expression thoughtful. "Could be an outpost, or maybe a stash of their tech. Whatever it is, I doubt they wanted us to find it." Cade nodded, the gears in his mind turning. "If we can get to whatever this leads to, we might have a chance of figuring out why they came or even turning their own tech against them." Jax chuckled, shaking his head. "So, basically, you're suggesting we follow a map left by the guys who tried to kill us? What could possibly go wrong?" Cade grinned, adrenaline lending a reckless edge to his smile. "Everything, Jax, everything could go wrong, and that's exactly why we need to do it." They debated briefly over the merits of blind curiosity versus the basic instinct for survival before loading up and heading out, their path illuminated by the alien map. As they traveled further into the quarantine zone, the alien landscape grew more bizarre, filled with structures that defied earthly logic and physics, twisting and spiraling in ways that made Cade's head hurt just to look at them. Between dodging debris and the occasional unsettling rumble from the distance, Cade found moments to reflect on the absurdity of it all. Here they were, a handful of humans marching through the remnants of an alien invasion on Mars, armed with little more than stubbornness and a healthy disregard for their own safety. If there was a book on how to be the worst tourists ever, they'd be on the cover. Their destination turned out to be a cavernous structure, half buried in the red Martian soil. It looked like the love child of a bunker and an art installation, all angles and shadows. Cade stared at it, feeling a strange sense of familiarity, as if he'd seen it before in a particularly vivid nightmare. "Well, this looks inviting," Tessa said, peering into the dark entryway. "Shall we?" Cade grinned, feeling the thrill of discovery outweigh the panic of potential demise. "After you." Inside, the air was surprisingly breathable, the oppressive atmosphere of Mars giving way to something almost comfortable. The walls hummed with a faint, omnipresent energy, and the floor was lined with alien technology, most of it inactive but still impressive in its complexity. Jax whistled appreciatively. This would make one hell of a tech convention. Tessa was already moving towards what looked like a central control node, and Cade followed, the rest of the team spreading out to explore. As Tessa worked, Cade kept a wary eye on the entrance, half expecting an alien welcoming committee to burst through at any moment. "Got something," Tessa said suddenly, drawing Cade's attention back. On the console in front of her, a series of images flickered to life. They were maps, but not of Mars. They showed Earth, its continents outlined starkly against the blue of the oceans. Cade leaned closer, his heart pounding. Why would they have maps of Earth? Tessa's face was grim. Looks like they were planning something bigger. Mars might have just been the first step. Jax joined them, his expression a mix of curiosity and concern. "So, what, they were planning on setting up shop on Earth next?" "Maybe," Tessa replied, her fingers flying over the controls. "Or they could have been planning an attack. Either way, this is big." Cade nodded, the weight of their discovery settling over him like a lead blanket. "We need to get this back to command. If they were planning something on Earth, they need to know." The team gathered the data, the gravity of their find pushing aside the usual banter. As they turned to leave, the structure shuddered, the hum of the technology growing louder. Cade's instincts screamed at him to move. "Time to go," he yelled, urging the team towards the exit. They scrambled out of the structure, back into the harsh Martian landscape. As they put distance between themselves and the alien edifice, the ground beneath them rumbled ominously, the structure beginning to collapse in on itself. Looks like they had a self-destruct feature, Jax commented, a wry smile tugging at his lips. Of course they did, Cade replied, not breaking stride. Everyone loves a dramatic exit. Back at base, they quickly transmitted their findings to Earth, the weight of their discovery heavy on their shoulders. Command's response was swift, the crackle of the comms carrying a tension that matched their own. Good work, Arland. We're analyzing the data now. Earth has been notified, and we're mobilizing resources. You've just become the most popular people on Mars. Cade smirked, the tension of the day finally winding down. Well, it's about time we got some recognition. How about that hazard pay? As Command signed off, Cade looked at his team. The camaraderie forged in fire and chaos stronger than ever. Looks like we've got a front row seat to whatever comes next. Tessa nodded, her eyes bright with defiance. Bring it on. We've got the best seats in the house. Jax grinned, clapping Cade on the back. And if they thought Mars was a pain, just wait until they get a load of us. The team laughed, the sound echoing through the Martian night, a testament to human stubbornness and the absurdity of their situation. Despite everything, they were ready. Ready to face whatever came next, ready to fight, ready to survive. Because if there was one thing they'd learned on Mars, it was that sometimes the universe threw lemons at you. And sometimes, if you were lucky, those lemons exploded in someone else's face. As they settled in for the night, Cade looked out at the red planet, the sky above both a reminder of what they faced and what they'd overcome. The battle for Mars was far from over, but for now, they were still standing. And that was enough, for now. The Martian dawn found Cade Arland in a familiar predicament, staring at a malfunctioning communications console and cursing the universe. You ever think, he mused aloud, fiddling with a tangle of wires, that maybe the universe just hates us? Jax, lounging nearby and inspecting his oxygen mask like it was a fine piece of jewelry, smirked. I dunno, Cade, maybe it's just you. I seem to recall the universe being quite fond of me before I signed up for this mission. Sure, Cade replied, jerking a thumb at the console, and I'm the king of Mars. Now, do me a favor and kick this thing. Gently, Jax obliged, delivering a precise thump that elicited a wheeze from the console. It sputtered to life but communicated nothing more than a faint hope that maybe, just maybe, it'd see better days. The other team member, Tessa, was hunched over a table strewn with alien tech, her fingers dancing between bits and pieces like a pianist on a caffeine binge. Any luck? Cade asked, eyeing her with what might have been optimism if he hadn't spent a lifetime having it beaten out of him. Tessa flicked her gaze up, a sardonic tilt to her lips. If you call vaguely understanding what this button does luck, then sure. We're practically bathing in it. Cade grunted, his own lips twisting into a grin despite their predicament. What does it do, then? It lights up, she replied, deadpan. Very fancy. Jax chuckled, drumming his fingers on his knee. Hey, at this point, I'd settle for a decorative alien nightlight. Cade leaned back, rubbing a hand over his face. Command's not picking up. Our last message went through, but now, nothing. It's like trying to get customer service. All you get is hold music and suicidal thoughts. Let me guess, Jax said, arching an eyebrow. Problems with the warranty? Something like that, Cade replied. Just a hunch, but I think our alien friends might have noticed we found their little hideout. Tessa glanced up, concern flickering across her face. You think they're back? Either that or the dust devils have learned to jam comms, Cade said. Either way, we're cut off, and I'm fresh out of ideas. Silence descended, broken only by the hum of the makeshift tech they'd cobbled together from salvaged parts. Outside, the Martian landscape stretched endlessly, its red dust a constant reminder that this was a planet that took no prisoners. Well, Jax said finally, rising to his feet with the grace of a man who knew he was about to suggest something stupid, if they're coming back, maybe we should throw them a welcome party. Cade snorted. With what? We're low on everything. Ammo, food, my patience. Jax shrugged, a mischievous glint in his eye. We improvise. Isn't that what humans are best at? Yeah, Cade agreed, feeling the stirrings of determination. And making things worse, the team set to work. There was a certain grim camaraderie in preparing for an invasion while stranded on a hostile planet, like a bad reality TV show with fewer commercial breaks and more existential dread. Hours passed, each tick of the clock bringing them closer to whatever fate had planned. Tessa worked furiously over the alien tech, her brow furrowed in concentration as if sheer willpower could bend the alien machinery to her understanding. Cade kept watch, surveying the horizon with an intensity born of necessity. He'd never been one for speeches or grand declarations, but he knew his team needed something to hold on to. Listen up, he said, drawing their attention. We've faced worse. Maybe not on Mars, but in life. Jack snorted, crossing his arms. Worse than alien invaders? I'm intrigued. Yeah, Cade replied, a grin tugging at his lips. Remember that time on Titan when we ran out of coffee? Tessa barked a laugh, her eyes never leaving her makeshift workbench. Now that was a disaster. Cade nodded, the weight of their current situation settling over him like a shroud. Point is, we'll get through this. Or we'll die trying, but let's focus on the first part. Very uplifting, Tessa said dryly, shooting him a sideways glance. Hey, I'm a natural motivational speaker, Cade replied. Just not a very good one. Their banter was interrupted by a distant rumble, the ground beneath them vibrating with the unmistakable approach of something large. Cade's heart skipped a beat, his mind snapping to attention. Showtime, he said, his voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The team moved with practiced efficiency, each of them anticipating the other's actions without needing to communicate. They'd worked together long enough that words were often unnecessary, intuition and trust filling the gaps. Out on the barren Martian plains, shadows danced and flickered, the telltale signs of movement drawing closer. Cade squinted, trying to discern details through the shifting dust. What are we looking at? Jax asked, his voice low and tense. Something big, Cade replied, his grip on his weapon tightening. And ugly, if the universe is feeling consistent. Tessa, finally looking up from her improvised control panel, joined them, her expression one of grim determination. Let's hope they're more bark than bite. The Martian wind howled around them, a mournful symphony that drowned out all but the pounding of their hearts. As the alien shape solidified into view, Cade felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. Remember, he said, his voice steady, we're not just fighting for Mars. We're fighting for Earth, for all the coffee and bad movies and stupid things we've ever known. Great, Jax muttered, now I'm motivated. Thanks, boss. The alien scouts emerged from the dust, their forms sleek and intimidating, like nightmares given physical shape. Cade braced himself, his mind racing with the possible scenarios that could unfold. And then, just as all hell looked ready to break loose, Tess's console beeped a sharp, insistent sound that was both terrifying and oddly reassuring in its familiarity. What the hell was that? Cade asked, glancing at Tessa. Something that was probably a bad idea, she replied, her fingers flying over the controls. As the aliens advanced, the air around them shimmered, a ripple of energy that sent shudders through Cade's bones. It was like watching a magic trick where the payoff was likely to be a bullet to the head. But instead of unleashing whatever doom they had in store, the aliens hesitated, their movements faltering. Cade exchanged a quick glance with Jax and Tessa, surprise palpable among them. Did you just hack them? Jax asked, his voice equal parts disbelief and awe. Tessa shrugged, a modest smile playing on her lips. I might have pushed a few buttons. Cade let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Remind me to never piss you off. The aliens seemed to waver, their advance stalling as if caught in some internal conflict. It was the kind of unexpected turn that bordered on miraculous, though Cade wasn't about to question their luck. All right, let's not waste this opportunity, Cade said, rallying his team. Time to make our retreat. They moved quickly, the adrenaline sharpening their movements, each step taking them further from the alien threat. The landscape blurred around them, an endless expanse of red dust that seemed to offer no sanctuary, yet here they were, alive for one more day. As they reached the relative safety of a rocky outcrop, Cade turned to face his team, his expression a mix of relief and disbelief. Well, that went better than expected. Jax chuckled, a weary but genuine sound. I'd rate it a solid 6 out of 10 for execution, but a 10 for improvisation. Tessa folded her arms, her wry smile a balm against the chaos. Maybe they'll give up and head home. Cade shook his head, the weight of the situation settling back on his shoulders. Doubt it, but hey, at least we gave them something to think about. In the aftermath of their unlikely victory, the Martian landscape seemed almost serene, the chaos of the last hour giving way to a tenuous peace. It was a reminder that survival, much like life, was a series of small victories strung together against the odds. As the team regrouped, the reality of their situation loomed large. They were still stranded, still cut off from Earth, and still facing an alien threat with dwindling resources. But for now, they had each other, and that was enough to face whatever fresh hell awaited. Cade took a deep breath, the thin Martian air filling his lungs, and found himself smiling despite everything. Looks like we're the stars of our own sci-fi epic. Jax nodded, clapping him on the back. Yeah, and it's one hell of a ride. As the Martian night closed in around them, the team settled in for another tense night, their thoughts inevitably turning to the worlds they'd left behind. But beneath it all, A spark of hope lingered, stubborn and unyielding. Because if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was surviving against the odds and finding humor in the dark. And if the universe wanted a fight, well, Cade and his team were more than happy to oblige. The Martian night was as cold as a corporate lawyer's soul, and Cade felt every bit of it as he peered over the jagged rocks that served as their makeshift cover. The alien scouts had scattered, regrouping like predatory wolves just beyond the reach of his weapon's meager range. He glanced at Jax and Tessa, noting their silhouettes against the crimson horizon, two black shapes outlined in the color of dread. Well, aren't we just the picture of optimism? Cade muttered, checking his weapon again. Anybody got a plan B? You know, preferably one that doesn't involve our untimely demise. Jax blew out a breath, fogging up the inside of his oxygen mask. I was thinking of negotiating with them. You know, offer them a subscription to our Martian newsletter. Greetings from Hellhole, Inc. Think they bite? Depends, Tessa said, eyes glued to her alien control panel. Do they have a return policy for abducted humans? Cade chuckled despite himself. Let's save the jokes for after we've survived, alright? Not that survival seemed likely at this point. The aliens were spreading out, clearly preparing to flush them from their hiding spot. And with their communications still on the fritz, they couldn't even call in a pizza delivery, let alone reinforcements. You know, Jax said, peering into the gloom, I've always figured I'd die due to my lousy taste in music or because I crossed paths with the wrong ex. Never expected it to be alien-related. Tessa snorted. At least it's unique. Better than death by boredom. Sorry to interrupt this philosophical powwow, Cade said dryly, but it looks like the welcoming committee's getting restless. As if on cue, one of the alien scouts loomed into view, its sleek form glinting in the feeble light, an unsettling blend of organic curves and metallic menace. Cade aimed his weapon, steadying his grip with the kind of focus he usually reserved for hate-watching reality TV back on Earth. All right, folks, he said, his voice low and calm, expect the worst and hope for the least painful. The alien advanced, its movements unnervingly fluid, like a mantis on speed. Cade felt the pressure of the moment, the cold weight of inevitability pressing down like a boot on an ant. Jax, ever the optimist, nudged his shoulder. Hey, boss, think it's too late to start a conga line? Cade didn't bother dignifying that with a response. Instead, he tightened his grip on the weapon, ready to make his defiance known the only way he could, by going down shooting. On 3, he said, counting down with his fingers. The air was electric with tension, the kind that makes you acutely aware of every breath, every heartbeat, every damn second ticking away. 1, 2, before he could reach 3, Tessa's console beeped, the sound sharp and unexpected. She blinked down at it, surprise etched across her face. What now? Cade asked, exasperation mixing with curiosity. Did you order takeout or something? Try door number 2, Tessa replied, her fingers flying over the controls. I might have triggered something. Something useful, I hope. The ground beneath them trembled, a low rumble that sent shudders through Cade's bones and made his teeth rattle like loose change in a dryer. Jax grinned, a wild, reckless joy that only made sense to someone who frequently laughed in the face of senseless danger. I don't know what you did, Tessa, but I've got a good feeling about it. Cade wasn't sure, good was the right word. Interesting, maybe, or suicidal, but he'd learned early on that survival often hinged on reckless gambits and the occasional stroke of dumb luck. The alien scout paused, its movements stuttering as if caught in a loop, a glitch in the matrix. Its sleek form twitched, then jerked back as if repelled by an invisible force. Cade blinked, trying to reconcile what he was seeing with the reality he'd come to expect. Did you just scare it off? Maybe, Tessa said, a note of triumph in her voice. I mean, there's a first for everything, right? The alien retreated, its form melting back into the shadows, a retreat that was echoed by its companions. For a moment, disbelief hung in the air like a bad smell, a collective pause as their brains caught up with their eyes. Okay, Cade said slowly, his mind racing to understand. What just happened? Tessa shrugged, her hands still busy at the controls. I think I activated some kind of repulsion field. Or maybe I just gave them a really bad stink eye. Whatever it is, Jax said, his grin wide enough to split his face, I'd say it's working. You'll get no argument from me, Cade replied, the tension in his chest easing just a notch. But let's not get comfortable. We need to capitalize on this while it lasts. They moved quickly, utilizing the rocky terrain to their advantage. The Martian landscape was both adversary and ally, its jagged outcrops providing cover and concealment as they maneuvered away from the aliens. Every step was a gamble, a bet placed against the house with odds stacked like a Jenga tower in a hurricane. Cade's mind was a flurry of calculations, his instincts honed from years of barely scraping by in situations that made dire look like a vacation brochure. Stick together, he ordered, voice firm. We need to find a defensible position and hold out until we can get this console back online. Tessa nodded, her expression focused. I'll keep working on it. Maybe we can get lucky twice in one day. Jax snorted. Twice? Hell, I'd settle for once. My luck's usually on backorder. Their path wound through the dusty expanse, each step taking him further from the immediate threat but never far enough to shake the feeling of being hunted. The alien scouts were relentless, and Cade knew better than to believe they'd given up easily. As they reached a ridge overlooking a shallow valley, Cade signaled for them to halt. The vantage point was perfect for defense, giving him a clear line of sight while offering some degree of cover. All right, he said, taking in the terrain. We'll make our stand here. Jax squatted, unpacking the few supplies they had left. It's a proper picnic spot, isn't it? Shame we didn't bring sandwiches. Or a spare army, Tessa added, her fingers never pausing in their dance over the console. I could really go for some reinforcements right about now. Cade scanned the horizon, keeping one eye on the shadows that shifted with the dying light. Keep that console singing, Tessa. It's our only shot at contacting command. The Martian wind howled around them, a desolate symphony that underscored the bleakness of their situation. It was a stark reminder that they were alone, cut off from any kind of support, and facing an enemy that was both alien and unknowable. Hey, boss, Jax said, his tone lighter than the situation warranted. If this is our last stand, got any last words of wisdom? Cade considered the question, a grim smile tugging at his mouth. Don't die, bad for morale. Jax laughed, the sound loose and free despite everything. Good advice, I'll keep that in mind. The alien scouts regrouped, their silhouettes ghosting across the Martian plains, a phantom army poised to strike. Cade felt the weight of the impending confrontation, a knot in his gut that refused to uncoil. Tessa's console beeped again, a sound that was rapidly becoming the most welcome thing in their lives. Got something, she announced, her voice tight with concentration. I'm rerouting the signal, might be able to boost our comms. Do it, Cade urged, willing the universe to throw them a bone, just this once. The air around them shimmered, a ripple of energy that danced across the landscape like a fever dream. The alien scouts hesitated again, their advance stalling as if caught in some unseen barrier. Cade didn't waste the opportunity. Take M down, he snapped, raising his weapon and firing off a shot that echoed like thunder in the thin air. Jax and Tessa followed suit, their weapons lighting up the night in a defiant blaze of resistance. The aliens faltered, their sleek forms disrupted by the sudden intensity of the human assault. The odds were still against them, a few humans with limited resources against a technologically superior foe. But what they lacked in firepower they made up for in sheer bloody-mindedness. Keep it up, Cade urged, shifting his aim to compensate for the recoil. Give them hell. Tessa's console beeped again, an insistent rhythm that blended with the chaos of battle. I'm in, she said, her voice ringing with triumph. I've got a line to command. About time, Cade replied, his heart lifting at the glimmer of hope. Tell them we could use some firepower. And maybe a pizza, while they're at it. Already done, Tessa said, a fierce grin on her face. The aliens pulled back, their retreat a cautiously calculated maneuver rather than a panicked flight. Cade knew they hadn't seen the last of them, but for now, they had a precious reprieve. He lowered his weapon, the adrenaline thrumming through him like a live wire. Nice work, team. Jax flopped down beside him, breathless but grinning. Not bad for a bunch of rejects from Earth, huh? Speak for yourself, Tessa replied, sinking to the ground with a weary sigh. I've always considered myself top-quality reject material. Cade chuckled, feeling a rare camaraderie that pierced through the gloom. We might survive this yet. The Martian night stretched out before them, an uncertain future wrapped in darkness and possibility. They were still stranded, still facing the unknown, but they'd bought themselves time, and for now, that was enough. As they settled in to wait for whatever came next, Cade couldn't help but reflect on the absurdity of it all. Here they were, human misfits on a hostile planet, defying the odds with nothing but grit and sarcasm. If the universe wanted a fight, it had come to the right place. Because humans, he'd decided, were nothing if not stubborn. Cade Arlen shot a glance at the Martian horizon, a jagged silhouette that looked like a lineup of busted teeth under the smoldering sky. Tension coiled in his gut like a snake ready to strike. The aliens had retreated for now, but they'd be back. They always came back, like that bad Penny or Jax's ex-girlfriend. Jax adjusted his oxygen mask, the straps digging into his cheeks. So, boss, he said, trying to sound nonchalant, when do we start screaming like lunatics and run for the hills? After lunch, Cade replied dryly. I like to keep a schedule. Tessa was hunched over the alien control panel, her fingers flying across the buttons like a pianist on a caffeine high. If I can get this thing to cooperate, maybe we'll have more options than scream and run. Options are overrated, Jax said with a grin. I like running, keeps the blood flowing. Cade wasn't sure if Jax's optimism was genuine or a clever facade, but in a situation where the universe seemed determined to kick them in the teeth, it was a welcome distraction. Just keep your head down and your weapons ready, he said. We're not out of this yet. Tessa's console beeped, a sound more reliable than any alarm clock. She frowned at the screen, her expression thoughtful. I've rerouted some of the power. Might be enough to boost the comms if we can find another transmitter. Great, Jax said, rubbing his gloved hands together. Now all we need is a miracle and some duct tape. Cade shook his head, a wry smile twisting his lips. Add to it a bottle of whiskey and you've got yourself a plan. The wind picked up, a biting chill that seeped through their suits like an unwelcome guest. It was the cold that made everything on Mars feel more personal. That, and the fact they were about one wrong step away from meeting their maker. All right, Cade said, nodding towards the deeper part of the quarantine zone. Time to see what else this alien junkyard has to offer. They moved in formation, Cade leading the way with Tessa beside him, her gaze flicking between the console and the terrain. Jax brought up the rear, as if daring anything to sneak up on them. Anyone else feel like we're the stars of a really bad horror movie? Jax quipped. You know, the kind where everyone dies except the dog. Except we didn't bring a dog, Tessa pointed out. Fine, then, everyone dies, Jax conceded. Including the hypothetical dog. Not helpful, Jax, Cade muttered, scanning the area for anything useful. Look sharp. We need to find that transmitter before the aliens decide they want a rematch. They wove through the rocky outcrops, the shadows lengthening as the Martian night crept closer. Each step was a reminder of how little stood between them and the void, a thin layer of fabric and some questionable tech. Hey, Cade, Jax said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. You ever wonder if we're just a bunch of idiots running around on a deserted planet? Every damn day, Cade replied without missing a beat. But what else are we gonna do? Go back to Earth and tell them we gave up? Tessa snorted. Yeah, that'd look real good on the resume. Failed to save Mars, but learned to juggle. Amidst the ruins of alien tech, Cade spotted something promising, a structure that looked vaguely like a transmitter tower, albeit collapsed and half buried in rust-red sand. That's our target, he said, pointing it out. If we can rig it up, maybe we can get a message out. Tessa nodded, her eyes narrowing with determination. Let's see if I can sweet-talk it into working. They set to work, Cade and Jax clearing debris while Tessa fiddled with the alien device. Her muttered curses were a comforting soundtrack, a sign that at least one person hadn't lost their mind yet. How's it looking? Jax asked, trying to sound optimistic and failing admirably. Tessa sighed, a wry smile on her lips. Let's just say if this were a date, I'd be asking for the check. Cade grunted, peering at the twisted remnants of alien construction. Just get it working. I don't care if you have to serenade it. The cold deepened, the kind that made bones feel brittle and thought sluggish. It was as if Mars itself was trying to freeze them out, another layer of hell in their own personal inferno. Anyone got a story to pass the time? Jax asked, trying to break the gloom with chatter. Something with a happy ending, maybe. Once upon a time, Tessa began in a deadpan tone, there were some idiots on Mars. They all froze to death. The end. Jax chuckled, the sound mingling with the wind. Ah, a classic. Cade cast a glance at the Martian horizon, the barren landscape stretching out like the world's worst postcard. Remember, this is just another day at the office, he said, more to himself than the others. Yeah, Jax said with a dry laugh. Except the coffee's terrible and HR's a bunch of aliens. Despite the odds stacked against them, there was a strange comfort in the banter. It was a human thing, Cade supposed, finding humor even when everything was going to hell. Tessa gave a triumphant cry, her fingers dancing over the panel. I think I've got it. The transmitter's operational. Now let's see if I can get a message out. Cade felt a flicker of hope, a rare spark in the encroaching night. Make it quick. We don't have much time before they decide to come back for round 2. The air was charged with anticipation, a static tension that crackled like electricity. Cade's eyes scanned the landscape, ever watchful for the first sign of movement. Sending now, Tessa said, her voice tight with concentration. She hit a final sequence of buttons, the console humming with an energy that seemed both alien and familiar. Think they'll hear us? Jax asked, leaning in to hear the low whine of the transmitter. Only if we're lucky, Cade said, a touch of cynicism creeping into his voice. And when's the last time you remember us being lucky? Jax shrugged. Hey, we're not dead yet. I'd call that a win. The Martian wind howled around them, a reminder of their isolation, their vulnerability. It was a world that tolerated no weakness, a crucible that tested them with every breath. Tessa finished her message, her expression a mix of hope and grim determination. "Now we wait," she said, her voice barely audible over the wind. Cade nodded, the weight of their situation settling over him like a leaden cloak. "Let's hope someone's listening." As they huddled together, waiting for a response that might never come, Cade couldn't shake the feeling that they were merely delaying the inevitable. The cold, the aliens, the sheer unforgiving nature of Mars, it was all stacked against them. "Think we'll get out of this alive?" Jax asked, his tone more serious than usual. Cade considered the question, the grim reality pressing in from all sides. "I don't know," he admitted, the words stark and unvarnished. "But I do know we're not going down without a fight." Tessa smiled, her eyes glinting with defiance. "Damn right we're not." The Martian night closed in, the darkness deep and all-encompassing. Yet amidst the gloom, there was a flicker of light, a spark of resistance that refused to be snuffed out. They were human, after all, stubborn, irreverent, and unyielding in the face of adversity. And as long as they had breath left in their lungs, they'd keep fighting. Cade settled in, his weapon ready, eyes on the horizon. It might be their darkest hour, but they hadn't lost yet. Not by a long shot. "Here's to us," he murmured, raising an imaginary glass to the heavens. "The last idiots standing." Jax chuckled, joining him in the gesture. "To the idiots." Tessa nodded, her smile fierce and unrelenting. "To the idiots." And with that, they steeled themselves for whatever came next, a band of misfits on a lonely planet, defying the universe with grit and gallows humor. If Mars thought it could break them, it had another thing coming. Because if there was one thing they were good at, it was surviving against the odds. Cade rubbed his gloved hands together, trying to keep the frigid Martian night from sinking into his bones. The makeshift camp was a pitiful sight, but it was theirs. Part of him wondered if they'd look back on these days with a sense of nostalgia. Then again, recalling near-death experiences fondly was something only psychopaths did. Tessa was still fidgeting with the alien transmitter, her fingers tapping away while muttering something that sounded suspiciously like a curse in binary. She certainly was a whiz with tech, but Cade often suspected she might just be half computer herself. "Hey, Cade, got a sec?" Jax's voice pulled Cade from his thoughts. He turned, arching a brow at the smirking figure. Jax was always the picture of misplaced cheer, like a clown at a funeral. "Yeah, Jax, what's up?" Cade replied, bracing himself for whatever nonsense Jax was about to spout. "Think we should call dibs on the throne once we scare these alien bastards off Mars?" Jax asked, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "I mean, someone's got to rule, right?" Cade snorted, shaking his head. "We barely have enough duct tape to keep our gear together, and you want to play king? Maybe focus on not freezing your ass off first." Jax shrugged, unfazed. "Hey, a man can dream. Plus, when's the last time someone called Mars a paradise?" "Right about the time we discovered it was full of aliens with a penchant for extermination," Tessa chimed in without looking up. Her focus had never wavered, an intense concentration that could probably melt metal if she glared long enough. "How's it coming?" Cade asked, nodding at the contraption in front of her. "Like pulling teeth," Tessa replied, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "From a crocodile. Sounds promising," Cade said dryly. "Yeah, but I found something interesting," Tessa continued, her tone shifting from frustration to intrigue. "This thing isn't just a transmitter. It's some kind of data repository. And get this, it's got tactical information on the aliens." Jax perked up, his grin fading as genuine interest took over. "You're telling me we've been sitting on a treasure trove of alien secrets this whole time?" "Yup," Tessa confirmed. "And if I can crack it open, we might just have ourselves a game changer." Cade felt a rare flicker of hope. It was like finding a winning lottery ticket in the pocket of your least favorite pair of pants. "How soon can you get it working?" "If you stop interrupting me, maybe by next Christmas," Tessa shot back, though there was an edge of excitement in her voice. Jax nudged Cade with an elbow. "Looks like we're not as screwed as we thought. Might even get to call ourselves heroes." "Let's not start planning the parade just yet," Cade replied. "We need a plan, something bold enough to make these aliens think twice before coming back." "Speaking of plans," Tessa interjected, "if I can get this thing operational, we could feed it false data. Mislead them, maybe even lure them into a trap." "Classic bait and switch," Jax said, nodding appreciatively. "Aliens won't know what hit them. Or it'll just piss them off even more," Cade added. "Either way, we can't sit here waiting for them to pick us off." Tessa looked up, her eyes alight with determination. "Give me a little more time, and I'll have something we can use." "Time's the one thing we're short on," Cade said, glancing at the horizon. The darkness was pressing in, and with it, the threat of another attack. They huddled closer, their breath fogging up their oxygen masks. The Martian wind howled around them, a relentless reminder that this planet was as hostile as any invader. "Hey, Cade," Jax said, his tone taking on a rare seriousness. "What if this doesn't work? Then we improvise," Cade replied with a shrug. "We've come this far, not about to roll over now." Tess's fingers flew across the interface, the alien symbols gradually giving way to something resembling coherence. "I think I've got something," she announced, a triumphant edge in her voice. Jax leaned in, curiosity etched on his features. "What kind of something?" Tessa smirked. "Blueprints, tactical formations, a whole lot of alien schematics that we might be able to use against them." Cade felt a thrill run through him, the kind that usually came from narrowly avoiding a grisly death. "This could be it," he said, a smile ghosting across his lips. "I'll wait to hit back. Just need to figure out how to use it," Tessa said, her eyes scanning the data. "These aliens aren't just going to fall for a simple trick. Then we make it complicated," Jax suggested, his grin returning with renewed vigor. "Throw everything we've got at them. Hell, maybe even convince them Mars is overrated." Cade chuckled. "If they knew what we did, they'd be packing their bags already." The mood shifted, the oppressive weight of their situation easing just a fraction. For the first time in what felt like ages, there was a glimmer of possibility, a hint that they might not just be victims of fate. "All right," Cade said, clapping his hands together. "Let's get this show on the road. Tessa, you keep working on breaking down those files. Jax and I will round up whatever supplies we can find." "Supplies?" Jax echoed, his eyebrows raised. "You mean like sticks and stones?" "Better than nothing," Cade replied. "Besides, a well-placed rock can do wonders." "Guess it's time we played to our strengths," Jax mused. "Human ingenuity versus alien tech. Who wins?" "We do," Tessa said firmly, her focus unwavering. "Because we've got something they don't." "What's that?" Cade asked, genuinely curious. "Stubbornness," Tessa said, her smile widening. "And a penchant for doing the impossible." With that, they set about their tasks, a renewed vigor coursing through them. The alien threat loomed, but they weren't just sitting ducks anymore. They were players in a high-stakes game, and for once, they had a hand to play. As Cade and Jax scavenged through the wreckage, Jax's mind was already racing with ideas. "So, we trick these aliens into thinking they've got the upper hand, and then we spring the trap. Easy as pie." "Yeah, if the pie's been left out in the sun for too long and might explode," Cade said, picking through alien debris with a critical eye. "Exploding pie," Jax mused. "Remind me to try that recipe sometime." They gathered what they could, a motley collection of junk and hopeful prospects. The Martian landscape stretched out around them, vast and unyielding, but for the first time, Cade felt like they might just have a fighting chance. Returning to camp, they found Tessa still deep in concentration, her fingers dancing over the console like a maestro commanding an orchestra of chaos. "How's it going?" Cade asked, setting down an armload of assorted parts. "Getting there," Tessa replied, her voice tight with focus. "This alien tech might be advanced, but it's got some weaknesses. Like their choice in passwords." Jax chuckled. "Let me guess, password 123. "Close," Tessa said with a grin. "More like, invade Mars." "What's next?" Cade asked, surveying their meager resources. "We build a decoy," Jax suggested. "Something that looks important enough to distract them. And while they're too busy focusing on the decoy, we hit them where it hurts," Tessa added, her eyes blazing with determination. "Sounds like a plan," Cade said, the thrill of the hunt coursing through his veins. It was dangerous, reckless, and exactly what they needed. They worked into the night, their breath creating little clouds in the frigid air. Jax cracked jokes, Tessa grumbled at the alien tech for being stubborn, and Cade felt a strange sense of camaraderie settle over them. It wasn't pretty, and it sure as hell wasn't safe, but in the midst of chaos, they'd found a way to make themselves more than just survivors. They were warriors, a ragtag group of misfits taking on the universe one stubborn step at a time. As the first tinges of dawn crept over the Martian horizon, painting the landscape in shades of muted orange, Cade surveyed their handiwork. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. A testament to human ingenuity and the sheer tenacity that kept them fighting long after any sane person would have given up. "Ready for this?" Cade asked, glancing at his companions. "Ready as I'll ever be," Jax replied, hefting a makeshift weapon with a grin that was more wolf than man. "Let's show these aliens what it means to mess with the wrong species," Tessa said, her eyes gleaming with the promise of battle. And with that, they prepared to face the oncoming storm, a trio of defiant figures standing tall against the odds. They'd come to Mars expecting to fix things, and they would one alien at a time, if they had to. For Cade, Tessa, and Jax, survival was no longer just the endgame. It was a stepping stone, a challenge to be met with grit and humor, a chance to prove that humans were more than just soft targets in a hard universe. As the first shadows crept over the horizon, the aliens would come, drawn by the beacon of false information and the lure of an easy victory. But they would find something else entirely. A fight. And this time, they weren't going to win. Cade peered through the wrecked viewport of what used to be a survey rover, his expression a mix of grim determination and sardonic amusement. If someone had told him 5 years ago that he'd be on Mars, using alien tech to launch an assault against said aliens, he would have laughed in their face and asked what brand of hallucinogens they were indulging in. Yet here he was, about as far from Earth as one could get without a ticket to oblivion, planning the most harebrained operation he'd ever conceived. "All right, team," he said, the wind catching his words and carrying them off into the ether. The Martian winds were like the world's worst messenger, always late and never reliable. "Here's the plan. We use this alien transmitter to feed them false tactical data. Make them think we're coming from the south when we're really, well, not." Tessa adjusted her oxygen mask, the straps leaving angry red marks on her cheeks. "I can patch into their systems, spoof a signal. With any luck, they'll think we're moving a convoy of something valuable." "Like our dignity?" Jax piped up. "Lord knows we've got that in spades." "Speak for yourself," Cade replied with a snort. "Mine left town the moment we crash-landed on this rock." They gathered around the alien control panel, an ominous mass of blinking lights and inscrutable symbols, looking like a prop from a low-budget sci-fi movie. Tess's fingers danced across the interface, a conductor orchestrating a symphony of chaos. Cade watched with a mix of admiration and dread. They were either about to become legends or cautionary tales. "How's it looking?" Jax asked, using a piece of twisted metal as a makeshift plinth. "Better than your last haircut," Tessa quipped, not missing a beat. "I've got their comms on the line. Spoofing the signal, now." The console beeped, a sound Cade decided to interpret as mission accomplished, rather than ticking time bomb. "That's it, then. We give them a reason to chase ghosts. And while they're busy doing that," Jax added, "we hit where it hurts." "Right in the mothership." "Exactly." Cade pulled his scarf tighter around his neck, his breath fogging up the visor of his mask. "We need to be quick and quiet. Like a fart in church." "A what?" Tessa asked, eyebrows raised. "Just roll with it," Cade muttered. "Everyone knows the plan." Tessa nodded, a rare glint of excitement in her eyes. "Feed them false data, led them on a wild goose chase, then we strike." "Simple enough." "Yeah, simple," Jax echoed with a laugh. "Simple like brain surgery with a spoon." "Better get moving," Cade said, scanning the horizon. "The aliens are punctual bastards. Wouldn't want to miss their own execution." They slipped into the Martian night, their shadows long and distorted in the dim light. Cade led the way, his thoughts a swirl of strategy and snark. He couldn't help but feel a flicker of pride in him, a motley crew of misfits turned soldiers, out to change the universe with nothing but grit and a sense of humor. As they approached the alien mothership's location, they stayed low, moving from cover to cover. The landscape was littered with craters and debris, each step a potential ankle-twisting hazard. Yet they pressed on, driven by the prospect of finally flipping the script on their unwelcome neighbors. Jax, ever the optimist, broke the oppressive silence. "So, once we've sent these E.T. bastards packing, maybe we can send a postcard back home. Dear Earth, wish you were here. Mars is lovely this time of year." With a picture of our middle fingers, Tessa added. "All right," Cade whispered as they took up positions near the mothership, a colossal mass that blotted out the stars like a malignant tumor. "Tessa, you ready to unleash hell?" She nodded, the makeshift comms link in hand. "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Or a tech geek with a grudge." Jax smirked. "Remind me never to piss you off." "Wouldn't dream of it," Tessa replied with a wink. She began the transmission, feeding the aliens a diet of lies and misdirection. The air hummed with tension, a silent countdown to chaos. Cade watched the alien lights flicker in response, a dance of confusion and fury. "Now, Jax, time to give them a proper goodbye." Jax hefted the alien weapon they'd salvaged, an awkward amalgamation of metal and menace. He aimed it at the mothership, a grin spreading across his face. "Hope these bastards like surprises." The weapon hummed to life, a low thrumming sound that resonated through the ground. Cade held his breath, the moment stretching out until it snapped back like an elastic band. The weapon discharged with a blinding flash, striking the mothership with a crackling explosion. The aliens responded predictably, their forces scrambling to respond to the perceived threat. Like ants scurrying from a disturbed nest, they swarmed in every direction except the one that mattered. "Time to move," Cade ordered, their voices almost drowned by the cacophony of the unfolding chaos. "Let's finish this." They surged forward, the terrain a blur beneath their feet. Cade felt a thrill rise within him. a heady mixture of fear and exultation. They were small, insignificant specks against the monolithic might of the alien force, but they were also something far greater: humans, with the audacity to challenge the gods. Reaching the heart of the mothership, they found themselves facing a squad of alien soldiers. Cade barely had time to take cover before the air was filled with the sharp crack of energy weapons, the ground around him erupting in a shower of sparks and debris. "Well, they don't look too happy," Jax shouted over the din, returning fire with enthusiasm rather than precision. "Would you be, if someone crashed your party?" Tessa quipped, darting from cover to cover. Cade focused on the task at hand. "We've got to get to the core, disable their systems. Everything else is just a diversion." The fight was fierce, the aliens relentless. But Jax's unorthodox combat style, a blend of bravado and sheer unpredictability, managed to keep them on the back foot. Tessa, meanwhile, used her ingenuity to disrupt their tech, the aliens' own tools turned against them in a perverse twist of fate. "Almost there," Cade called out, breathless but undeterred. The path to the core was littered with the debris of their assault, a testament to their refusal to back down. Finally, they reached the central chamber, a vast, pulsating hub of alien technology. "Now what?" Jax asked, his gaze darting around the room. Tessa moved to the control panel, her eyes sharp with focus. "We take them offline, permanently." Cade nodded, placing his last charge of explosives in a strategic nook. "Let's give them something to remember us by. Preferably from a distance," Jax added, backing towards the exit. As they withdrew, Tessa finished her work, the alien systems flickering and dying in a cascade of sparks. The mothership shuddered, a dying beast in its final throes. "Time to leave," Cade urged, pulling Jax along. "I've had enough alien hospitality for one lifetime." They sprinted from the ship, the ground shaking beneath them as explosions ripped through its core. The alien forces, disoriented and leaderless, faltered, their formidable cohesion unraveling before their eyes. The team, battle-worn but victorious, regrouped at a safe distance. Cade watched the mothership's demise with a mix of satisfaction and disbelief. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd turned the tide. "Well," Jax said, panting but grinning. "I'd say that went rather well, all things considered." Tessa nodded, her expression one of weary triumph. "It wasn't pretty, but it worked." Cade allowed himself a rare smile, his relief tempered by the knowledge of what lay ahead. They'd won a battle, but the war was far from over. Yet for now, they'd savor this victory, however fleeting. "Not bad for a bunch of misfits," Cade remarked, a twinkle of humor in his eyes. "Now let's see if we can get back to camp without getting eaten by the local wildlife." Jax laughed, a sound rich with the joy of the moment. "Always the pessimist, Cade." "Realist," Cade corrected. "This is Mars, after all. Anything can happen." As they trudged back across the desolate landscape, Cade felt a surge of hope, fragile but persistent. They'd faced the impossible and emerged on the other side, battered but unbroken. Perhaps, just perhaps, they might have a future here after all. The dust was still settling when they made it back to base camp, their silhouettes cast long and lean against the Martian landscape, like something out of a cowboy movie, if cowboys had worn oxygen masks and carried alien blasters. The camp was a small collection of HAB modules, looking more like a collection of tin cans left out in a sandstorm than humanity's last bastion on Mars. But it was home, for now. Cade flopped onto an empty crate with all the grace of a marionette with half its strings cut. "Well," he said, pulling his mask off and letting the acrid, metallic taste of recycled air fill his lungs. "I'd say that was a success." "Depends on your definition," Tessa replied, dropping her own mask and rubbing the red marks left behind by the straps. "If by success you mean not entirely dying, then yes." Jax was already raiding the supplies, pulling out what passed for a celebratory drink in these parts, a canister of something labeled, nutritional beverage number 5. He cracked it open with a grimace. "Here's to us," he said, raising it high. "The idiots that punched a hornet's nest and lived to tell the tale." They all took a swig, and Cade promptly gagged. "Tastes like an old boot looks," he coughed. "Better than the last batch," Tessa noted, wiping her mouth. "At least this one doesn't double as paint thinner." The mood was a strange blend of triumph and exhaustion. They'd done what few had dared or lived to attempt, taken on the alien mothership and brought it to its knees. But the sense of victory was tinged with the knowledge that the fight was far from over. Mars was still a hostile place, and not just because of the aliens. The planet itself seemed to have it in for them, a relentless adversary with an endless vacuum of patience. Cade watched the others as they carried on with the familiar banter, feeling a small swell of pride. They were a ragtag bunch, but they'd risen to the occasion. He looked out at the red planet beyond, the horizon jagged against the black sky, and allowed himself a moment to hope. Of course, the moment was interrupted by the blare of an old-fashioned klaxon. What now? Jax groaned, slamming his drink down. Cade pulled himself to his feet with a resigned sigh. Let's find out. The source of the noise was a transmission coming through on their ancient, battered comms equipment. The sound quality was atrocious, but the message was clear enough. They'd caught the attention of Earth Command. Arland, this is Command. Report your status. Command, this is Cade Arland, he replied, putting on his best, I'm not entirely incompetent, voice. We've dealt with the mothership problem. There was a pause filled with static, as if someone on the other end was trying very hard not to choke on their coffee. Repeat that, Arland. The mothership, Cade said slowly, savoring every syllable like it was a fine wine. It's not a problem anymore. You're telling me a team of 3 managed to take down an entire alien mothership? Well, when you put it like that, it sounds impressive, Jax chimed in, grinning like a fool. Tessa added, to be fair, they did most of the blowing up themselves. We just encouraged it. There was another long pause from Command. Acknowledged. We'll be sending a team to debrief you shortly. Good work, Arland. Cade cut the transmission and turned back to the others. Looks like we're heroes. Couldn't have done it without you, Cade, Jax said, clapping him on the back. Of course, you also couldn't have done it without me. And my genius-level tech skills, Tessa added with a wink. Let's not get too carried away, Cade warned, though his heart wasn't in it. We've still got a planet to deal with. The days that followed were a blur of activity. Earth Command sent a team to help clean up the mess, and before long, Mars was buzzing with a new kind of energy. News of their success spread like wildfire, igniting a sense of hope that had long been absent. The scattered human settlements began to unite, pooling resources and sharing information. It was as if the whole planet had been holding its breath, waiting for a sign that things might get better. Cade found himself in the unexpected position of being a leader, not just of his little team of misfits, but of something much larger. It was a role he'd never wanted, but one he couldn't easily shrug off. People looked to him for guidance, for a plan, for reassurance that they could actually pull this off. He stood on the makeshift platform they'd erected in the center of the camp, looking out at the gathered crowd. Men and women, engineers and scientists, miners and builders, all staring at him like he had the answers. He cleared his throat, wondering how the hell he'd ended up here. Listen up, he called, and the murmur of conversation died down. We've done something incredible. We've shown those alien bastards that we're not just gonna roll over and die. But this is just the start. Mars is a tough place, and it's not gonna get any easier just because we've taken out one threat. He let his gaze travel over the faces before him, each one marked by the hard life they'd chosen. But if there's one thing I know about humanity, it's that we don't give up. We get knocked down, we get back up. We lose, we learn. And we come back swinging. A ripple of agreement passed through the crowd, a low hum of determination. So, let's keep at it, Cade continued. Let's keep building, keep fighting. Not just for ourselves, but for everyone who's gonna come after us. Let's show this planet that we're here to stay. The crowd erupted into applause, and Cade felt a strange sensation in his chest, a flicker of something warm and unfamiliar. Hope, maybe, or possibly the chili he'd had for lunch. As the crowd dispersed, Jax came up to him, a grin plastered across his face. Look at you, going all inspirational on us. Who knew you had it in you? Certainly not me, Cade said dryly. I was just hoping I didn't say something stupid. Hey, stupid works sometimes, Tessa chimed in, joining them. Got us this far, didn't it? Together, they watched as the camp sprang to life with renewed purpose. People worked side by side, the barriers of old rivalries and fears fading in the face of a common goal. It wasn't perfect. They still argued, still stumbled, but they kept moving forward. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in a palette of reds and purples, Cade found himself lingering at the edge of the camp, looking out at the vast, unforgiving landscape. Mars was a harsh mistress, but she'd given him something they couldn't find anywhere else, a chance to start anew. He felt a presence beside him and turned to see Tessa watching him with a curious expression. Penny for your thoughts. Just thinking about how far we've come, he replied, leaning against the rail. And how far we still have to go. You sound almost optimistic, she teased, bumping his shoulder lightly. Don't spread it around, he warned with a smirk. I've got a reputation to uphold. They stood in companionable silence, watching as the stars began to prick the night sky, sharp and clear above the barren world. It was a sight that always took Cade's breath away, a reminder of how small they were, and yet how vast their potential. Think we'll make it? Tessa asked eventually, her tone light but her eyes serious. I think we'll try, Cade said after a moment, meeting her gaze. And that's all we can really do, isn't it? True enough, she agreed, her mouth curling into a smile. "But for what it's worth, I think we've got a pretty good shot." Jax joined them, shaking his head in mock dismay. "You two getting all philosophical on me? What's next, poetry readings by the fire?" "Depends," Cade retorted. "You got any poems to share?" "Can't say that I do," Jax replied, raising his hands in surrender. "But I can whip up a mean haiku about alien invasions." They all laughed, the sound echoing across the empty plains, a defiant note in the Martian night. It was a laugh that held the promise of tomorrow, uncharted, uncertain, but theirs for the taking. And as they stood together, three unlikely heroes on a forsaken world, Cade felt a sense of something he'd long thought lost, a belief in the indomitable human spirit. It was a spark, small yet unquenchable, driving him ever onward. Mars was their home now, for better or worse. And for the first time, Cade was okay with that. As the stars wheeled overhead, he took a deep breath of the cold night air, feeling the weight of the past lift from his shoulders. The road ahead was long and fraught with challenges, but they would face it together. And somehow, against all odds, they would prevail. In the end, it wasn't the victories that defined them, nor the battles won. It was the simple, stubborn refusal to yield, the grit and humor that carried them through the darkest of times. And in that, they found their true strength. Cade turned back to the camp, the light of new fires flickering in the distance, a beacon of resilience and hope in the endless night. "Come on," he said, clapping Jax on the back. "Let's see what tomorrow brings." "Whatever it is," Jax replied, "I'm sure we'll screw it up in spectacular fashion." And with that, they headed back into the warmth and chaos of their ramshackle home, ready to face whatever lay ahead, together.